Hello, dear friends. Opinion piece. A strange month of July. Clement's prophecies. He said this July would be a strange one. Summer tremors for the fall. He announced a debt jubilee in the fall. Many will fall and rise again in the fall. A new spiritual energy is coming. God seems quiet, but he's waiting. November will be hypnotic and Christmas merry. ECB takes first step towards digital euro. Taliban conquers 85% of Afghanistan. Gold rises, silver holds despite the crisis. Dow Jones suffers sharpest loss in 3 weeks. Europe to ban the sale of gasoline and diesel cars. Protests in France and Greece against health restrictions. Cuba uses Chinese technology to block access to the internet. Miami mayor calls on US to bomb Cuba. Chinese Bitcoin miners flee in search of cheap electricity. UK pursues money laundering throughout cryptocurrencies. Let's start. I discovered this curious South African pastor, singer, and prophet who apparently died. It was caught my attention, and I offer a summary of his prophecies for the immediate future, that is, for the coming months. God told him that this is my nation, and I will change things according to the time and season, and explained that God seems quiet, but he's waiting. Clement was a South African singer-songwriter, a member of the band called Cosmic Blues, but he was best known for his prophecies. When he was 10 years old, his mother enrolled him at Trinity College in London, where he practiced his musical skills. He went from playing jazz to rock, and it was then that his rebellious attitude and behavior began. In 1974, he was mashed and stabbed and almost died. Since then, he changed his life and returned to a Christian life. Most prophets have had a traumatic experience in their life. Clement and his wife, Jane Elizabeth Barnes, married in 1978 and were blessed with 5 children in their many years of marriage. He then moved to the US with his wife and children. One day in 2016, Kim entered a hospital with pneumonia and died in November at the age of 60. In 2011, he prophesied that after Obama would come a fearless president who would bring order to the nation. In 2015, Kim prophesied that Trump would be president, and he got it right. So Clement's prophecies have gone viral right now. I miss July, he said, referring to the current month. For the current summer, he announced hurricanes and tornadoes, earth tremors, and discovery of a great devil. He said there are 2 presidents, one is double-minded, and there are 2 dark powers raging. He talked also of summer tremors to make autumn do its work in America. He literally said, "In the fall, many will fall and many will rise from the dust. In the fall, things shake and rebuilding and the release of resources occurs." This has been interpreted as a debt jubilee in the fall, more so with this phrase of his. Believe me, it can erase the debt, and it can set you free to dance again and give, and to rejoice in the Lord who made you. About the coming winter, he added that November will be hypnotic and at Christmas I will make you happy, to conclude with the phrase, a new spiritual energy is coming. Europe. ECB takes first step in long march toward digital euro. The European Central Bank took a first step Wednesday toward launching a digital version of the euro as part of the global push to meet growing demand for electronic means of payment and cope with the rise of cryptocurrencies. The European Central Bank approved a research phase that could ultimately lead to the implementation of a virtual currency by the middle of the decade. The next stage will be last 24 months and aims to address key design and distribution issues. European Union scraps digital levy targeting tech giants. The European Union has just moved a step closer to backing Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's international corporate tax reform plan by dropping a European digital tax that would have primarily impacted US tech companies. Brussels moves forward despite Ireland's reservations about the plan. Poverty risk in Europe. New initial estimates from Eurostat have revealed the potential impact of 2020 on the European Union's most economically at-risk countries. Losses in labour income were largely due to an unprecedented increase in the number of workers absent from work or working reduced hours. However, regular government transfers and taxes, as well as temporary policies, helped to offset the impact of the health crisis on household disposable income. Protests in France against health pass rules. Police in Paris clashed with protesters criticizing President Macron's plan to require a health certificate for entry to bars, restaurants and cinemas starting next month. Demonstration in Athens. More than 5,000 protesters, some carrying Greek flags and wooden crosses, demonstrated in Athens on Wednesday to oppose the Greek government's healthcare program. Plywood satellite from Finland. A Finnish company has received approval from the European Space Agency to launch a small wooden cube later this year. The novel design is intended to reduce space debris, but its first mission will simply be to test what happens to wood in the cold vacuum of space. England. British cryptocurrency hunt. More than $500 million in cryptocurrencies seized by UK police over the past month amid a crackdown on money laundering. Bank of England to crack down on secretive cloud computing services. Cloud computing providers for the financial sector can be secretive, and regulators must act to prevent banks' reliance on a handful of outside firms from becoming a threat to financial stability, the Bank of England said Tuesday. Sterling rises. The pound rose against the dollar on Wednesday as UK inflation rose more than expected to its highest level in nearly 3 years, putting the spotlight on the Bank of England's plan to maintain its massive stimulus program. Ecology. European Union launches big climate plan to raise money. European Union policy makers unveiled their most ambitious plan yet to tackle climate change on Wednesday, aiming to turn green goals into concrete action this decade and set an example for the world's other major economies to follow. Europe, Europe's push for electrification could include a ban on the sale of gasoline and diesel-powered cars within 2 decades. European Union lawmakers are set to propose new measures that will accelerate the ban on internal combustion engines. The major transport reboot, or rather a clean overhaul of vehicles, is part of new measures to cut carbon emissions by 55% from 1990s levels by 2030. By 2050, Europe plans to become the world's first continent with net zero emissions. Al Gore warns greenwashing could stall climate fight. Al Gore warned that the growing threat on greenwashing poses a significant and growing risk to a successful transition away from fossil fuels. China to rapidly expand major carbon market to add more polluters. China aims to rapidly expand its domestic carbon market to add more polluting industries once the system begins trading this month. Anhui becomes the latest Chinese province to eradicate cryptocurrency mining. Anhui in eastern China has become the latest province to announce a sweeping ban on cryptocurrency mining, saying the move will help ease an acute power shortage over the next 3 years. China's banned Bitcoin miners flee in search of cheap electricity. After the Chinese government banned cryptocurrency mining last month, hundreds of fellow miners gathered at a luxury hotel in western China to discuss their next steps, specifically where to find abundant, reliable and cheap electricity to power their expanding operations. Military news. US deploys F-16s to Bulgaria for another Black Sea exercise. 8 US F-16 multi-role combat aircraft arrived at Graf Ignatievo Air Base in Bulgaria, July 9th, for this year's interaction of the Russian Star military exercise. The joint US-Bulgarian Air Force exercise is being conducted to enhance the ability to rapidly deploy to remote locations and provide credible force to ensure stability in the region. The joint NATO exercises in the Ukrainian waters of the Black Sea ended on July 10th, but the warships of the NATO naval forces are in no hurry to leave the Black Sea. In addition, more alliance warships are passing throughout the Bosporus. They want to close Guantanamo. The second of 2 major defense budget bills has been approved by the House Appropriations Committee, providing $706 billion in funding for the Pentagon for FY 2022. The bill includes plans to close the Guantanamo Bay prison and end the 2001 and 2002 authorizations for the use of military force. Afghanistan. Taliban take 85% of Afghanistan. On Friday, the Taliban said they have now taken control of a whopping 85% of all territory in Afghanistan. However, this excludes the capital of Kabul and other densely populated areas. There are problems getting medicine and supplies into the country, as the Islamist group that US forces have been fighting for 20 years is poised to retake the entire Central Asian nation for the first time since 2001. Afghan Taliban seize border crossing with Pakistan. Taliban fighters in Afghanistan seized control of a key border crossing with Pakistan on Wednesday, one of the most important gains they have made so far during a rapid advance across the country as US forces withdraw. Chaos reigns on Pakistan-Afghanistan border. The Spin-Boldak-Chaman border crossing connects the towns of Wesh in Afghanistan Kandahar province and Chaman in Pakistan's Balochistan. Nearly 70,000 people are set to use the crossing every day. The Taliban takeover of the border town follows days of fighting with the Afghan government forces for control of Kandahar. Russia likely to help bring order to parts of Afghanistan. Russia and the remnants of the Northern Alliance will likely help maintain a semblance of order in parts of Afghanistan after the collapse of Kabul in the wake of the departure of US troops. Afghanistan could be headed for civil war after Washington has finished withdrawing its forces. Russia ready to activate Tajikistan military base. Russia said it is ready to activate a military base in Tajikistan in response to fighting in Afghanistan near the Central Asian country's southern border. After more than 1,000 Afghan troops withdrew from the fightings with the Taliban and fled to Tajikistan, Tajik officials requested help from a Russian-led military alliance. Tajikistan, Russia, and 4 other former Soviet states are members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Cyber attack on Iran's rail network. Iranian state television reported Friday evening unprecedented chaos at train stations across the country, leading to cancellations, immense delays, and confusion, affecting hundreds of lines after what was reported as a possible cyber attack. South Africa plans troop surge to quell unrest. South Africa plans to deploy up to 25,000 troops to 2 provinces where security forces are struggling to quell days of looting, arson, and violence, its defense minister told a parliamentary committee Wednesday. Economy. Dow Jones suffers sharpest loss in 3 weeks. Wall Street's industrial energy-dominated Dow Jones index suffered its biggest loss in 3 weeks Tuesday, as oil prices plunged on concerns about production unity within the OPEC cartel after an initial rally to 7-year highs. Oil slides 2% on oversupply fears. Oil prices fell more than 2% on Wednesday after the world's major oil producers reached a compromise on supply and after data showed that demand eased a bit in the most recent week. Crude oil prices have risen to highs not seen in nearly 3 years, but have been choppy of late on concerns about a supply rebound. Treasuries rise. Treasury futures and bonds rise after Powell says the economic recovery has not progressed enough to begin tapering. S&P futures hit new all-time highs after the central bank chief said he will continue to provide powerful support to the economy until the recovery is complete, which won't be for long, as the labor market is still a long way from the additional substantial progress needed to begin tapering bond purchases. Powell acknowledged that inflation is likely to remain elevated in the coming months before moderating. S&P 500 ends higher after Fed chairman calms market. The S&P 500 Standard & Poor finished with a gain after briefly touching an intraday high in a choppy session Wednesday as investors balanced inflation worries with reassuring comments from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. Biggest banks crash earnings as economy recovers. The four largest U.S. consumer banks posted blockbuster second quarter results this week after credit losses failed to materialize and the economy began to recover. Precious metals. Gold rises. Gold rose on Wednesday after Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell reassured investors that the central bank would continue its accommodative monetary policy despite a recent rise in inflation readings. Prices appear to be range-bound. The dollar rose, which affected the yellow metal following a stronger than expected consumer price index. Following solid inflation numbers, yields rose, with the 2-year rally outpacing the 10-year yield, reflecting a flattening on the interest rate curve. Silver holds despite stronger dollar. Silver is approaching the upper end of the current trading range at 26.30 as the dollar is gaining ground against a broad basket of currencies. The dollar index managed to break above resistance at 92.40 after the release of inflation data. Silver is one of the most versatile metals on Earth, with a unique combination of uses as both a precious metal and an industrial metal. Today, silver uses span many modern technologies, including solar panels, electric vehicles, and telephone devices. However, as Visual Capitalist points out, silver's uses in currency, medicine, art, and jewelry have helped advance civilization, commerce, and technology for thousands of years. America. Cuba uses China's tech systems to block internet access. Cuba is accused of adopting Chinese-made technology systems to control and block internet access amid reports that Cuba's messaging apps and internet service are being blocked in the communist-ruled country after thousands of citizens took the streets July 11th to protest against lack of freedom and worsening economic conditions. Senator Marco Rubio demands Biden take Cuba's situation seriously. Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio on Wednesday called on President Biden to take seriously the response that Cuban leader Miguel Díaz-Canel's regime is giving to demonstrators at protests that broke out in Cuba on Sunday. Miami mayor calls on U.S. to bomb Cuba. In the wake of anti-government demonstrations in Cuba, many U.S. officials are calling for Washington's intervention. The mayor of Miami has gone so far as to suggest that the U.S. should consider bombing Cuba. U.S. asks Cubans and Haitians not to try to enter the country by sea. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas on Tuesday asked Cubans and Haitians, whose countries face political crisis, not to risk their lives trying to enter the U.S. irregularly from the sea, and warned that they will not be allowed entry. Bolsonaro hospitalized after suffering from hiccups for more than a week. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was hospitalized Wednesday for an unusual reason: chronic hiccups. The leader, who had a rapid Trump-like rise to power in 2018, is being observed to identify the cause of the chronic hiccups. The president's office said, in the latest health scare for the Brazilian leader, who was in the stomach during the election campaign in 2018. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.